As we look at logos in more depth, when we use logical reasoning, we really are building our argument based on evidence and reasoning. So what are evidence and reasoning? Evidence is the supporting materials that you use to prove or disprove something. We want to use lots of evidence when our credibility is low or when our audience is opposed to our viewpoint. So when we're using evidence and when we're researching for evidence, use specific evidence. Use novel evidence. Use evidence that the audience hasn't heard before. That's what novel means. It just means new evidence. We want to know information that may be new to us. You also want to make sure that evidence is very specific. Don't simplify by saying words like a lot or a little. Tell us exactly how many. Tell us the detailed statistics, the exact number, so that we get a clearer picture. We also want you to cite your sources. Use sources that are credible. And when you cite those credible sources using those evidence, it helps build your credibility because we know it's not just you speaking, it's you, a research speaker, bringing us good detailed information. We also have to tell what our evidence means. Tell us how it connects, what it means, and how it connects to what we're doing. So that gives us a little bit about evidence. Now, let's look at what reasoning is. When we look at reasoning, it's the process of drawing a conclusion on the basis of evidence. So when we reason, we take the evidence, we analyze it, we evaluate it, we think about it, and we draw a conclusion. And so when we're reasoning and drawing a conclusion, there's 4 basic methods for reasoning. Reasoning from specific instances, reasoning from principle, causal reasoning, and analogical reasoning. Let's start by looking at reasoning from specific instances. Reasoning from specific instances moves your reasoning from particular facts to a general conclusion. So, our communication class is easy. Our instructor is an easy teacher. All communication classes are easy. Does that make sense? Not really. If we think about it and analyze that reasoning, we can say, no, one communication class being easy does not equal all other classes being easy. And that tells us right off the bat that reasoning from specific instances is never foolproof. There are always exceptions. And so when we reason from specific instances, we don't want to generalize too hasty. Don't jump to conclusions and only use a few instances to try to make a big general conclusion. We also have to be careful with our wording. If our evidence doesn't support a sweeping conclusion, don't make it. Qualify it and talk about what it exists to or what it connects to so that your reasoning becomes easier for the audience to follow. We also want to reinforce those arguments with specific instances, statistics, and testimony to help make them stand up better. The next type that we use is reasoning from principle. When we reason from principle, it's a reasoning that moves from a general principle to a specific conclusion. It's the opposite of reasoning from specific instances. All people have birthdays. I'm a person. I have a birthday. It's much easier for us to follow with reasoning, right? You listen to that reasoning and you say, wow, yep, that makes sense. If all people have birthdays, I'm a person, I must have a birthday. The problem is the general principle. All people have birthdays. There are very, very few things that people will all agree on as being true. All people having birthdays is one of the few. With reasoning from principle, if your audience agrees with your general principle, they're going to agree and accept your specific conclusion that you draw. The next type of reasoning is causal reasoning. Causal reasoning seeks to establish a relationship between causes and effects. 2 common errors that often occur with causal reasoning is something known as false cause or assuming events only have one cause. So let's look at what causal reasoning actually is. We're trying to establish a relationship between causes and effects. So let's think about this example of causal reasoning. It was raining. The road was slick with rain and I wrecked my car. Why did I wreck my car? Well, causal reasoning would say that I wrecked my car because of the rain. But I'm sure each of you is thinking of other reasons that I might have wrecked my car. So causal reasoning can be very, very tricky. We want to make sure that the cause actually connects with the effect that's there. And I mentioned false cause earlier. It's a fallacy that's out there. It's an error in causal reasoning in which a speaker mistakenly assumes that because one event follows another event, that the first event caused the second. Just because this came first and this came second doesn't mean that this caused this to happen. In Latin, false cause is known as post hoc ergo propter hoc. After this, because of this. And we realize that that may not always be true. Assuming that events only have one cause can also be a bad situation to go through. Think about how you feel right now. If you're having a really great day, it may be because somebody complimented your outfit, somebody was kind to you, your kids were good, your family was nice, and as a result, you're having a great day. Well, which one caused it? The combination of all of them may have. The last type of reasoning that we're going to look at quickly is analogical reasoning. If we look at the base word of an analogical, it's analogy, or reasoning that compares two cases and infers that what is true for the first case is also true for the second. So we're looking at two things, we're comparing them, and we're saying if it's true for this one, it's also going to be true for this one. So some guidelines for analogical reasoning. Are the two things that you're comparing essentially alike? If yes, your analogy is valid and you can continue on. If not, your analogy right off the bat is invalid. An invalid analogy is an analogy in which two cases being compared are not essentially alike. Analogical reasoning is often used for questions of policy. We use it when we think about, has this new policy been used elsewhere? If yes, are we similar to the other place that it's being used? When you use your reasoning, work to avoid fallacies. Think about the fallacies that might be present and try to avoid those. I hope you now have a better understanding of how evidence and reasoning can help build your logos and your persuasive speeches.